Hello, this is Howard from moneyblogging.net, and this video is about protecting your WordPress site from script kiddies and brute force login attempts. The major defenses can be divided up into the following categories. One is to have a strong password on your site. Another is to back up early and often. Another is to misdirect the attacker into thinking that he is getting something valuable when he is not. One is to slow down the attacker. Brute force tends to be a rapid series of guesses at a password, and if you can slow that down, you can use up more of the resources of the attacker and make it take much longer, centuries instead of just hours. Actually, if you're using a strong enough password, a brute force attack should not be successful. And finally, if you have a way of repelling the attacker, that's probably the best way. Now, why would a script kiddie want to hack some minor site? I have sites that have fewer than a dozen visitors a day, mainly because I haven't tended to them in a long time. I may or may not resurrect them, or I may try to sell them off. But those are still getting brute force attacks. Long ago, it used to be that most of the attacks on sites were to take over sites that had lots of traffic in order to get backlinks on them or redirect people to other sites, typically either a porn site or to a fake login site for some bank or something. However, today the traffic is not really a consideration. What the script kiddies or the other brute force people are actually after is building a bigger botnet. They want to get your site into their botnet so that they can use your host's computing power to help them with attacks on other sites, and then they can go after other sites either with a denial of service attack or trying the same sorts of attacks on various different weaknesses on higher profile, high value sites like a bank or maybe even a government site or some political site with a political view that they don't like. I've installed some plugins on my sites that allow me to detect an attack in progress, and I'm going to show you the logs, partial logs of one of them. This is from a plugin called Limit Login Attempts. It's a free plugin and it's very useful. I'll go into it in a little bit more detail later, but for right now, I'll show you the log, or at least partial log. There's actually about 5,000 entries in this log that were collected over a period of a couple of days. Notice that the vast majority of the attacks are either trying to log into admin or to administrator. Now, there are a few that are actually a little bit more worrisome. Here is one from another site that I own. Here is one which is probably put together out of a list of common add-ons and the name that they found on the site on one of the usernames, which is mine. So those are a little bit more worrisome. The rest of these look like straight script kiddie. Now, it's kind of interesting, and I'll mention this later. You see we have 3 lockouts here, 3 lockouts here, and 1 lockout here. So these people are just guessing admin, administrator, root from this IP address, which may or may not be spoofed, by the way. And they have a total of 7 lockouts. Now, I have one of the things that Limit Login Attempts does the way I had it set up was to lock out an IP for about 8,000 hours, which is better part of it's about 7 or 8 months, I believe. And yet, and I had the limit set at 2, and yet here are 7 lockouts, and I'll explain how that happened here later. Okay, first line of defense is a strong password. You actually need a unique password on every site that you access, including your bank account or Amazon or various other accounts. Now, using a unique, strong password on every account that you have is really a pain unless you have a password manager. I use a password manager called LastPass. They don't have an affiliate program, but I like it enough anyway that I got the paid version, which is actually a flea bite. Reason they don't have an affiliate account is because it doesn't cost enough to have enough money to share around. It's only like $24 a year or a couple of dollars a month. There are other similar products that are also good. A lot of them, like for instance LastPass, which has other features which are kind of nice, like form fills. There's one called RoboForms, which has a lot of the same features as LastPass, and at a similar cost, I believe. I have not used that one, but I've heard people speak well of it. The main thing is to just find one and use it. It's a bit of a learning curve, but once you actually get over that, you'll wonder how you ever managed to get by without one. Now, in order to use LastPass and probably other password managers as well, you'll need a secure but relatively easy to remember master password. Here is a way that I have had several of my clients construct a secure master password, and it works pretty well. What you do is you find a book. Just pick a random book, open it. You remember those things with pages made out of dead trees? Okay, anyway, if you don't have a real book, you can always call up one on your iPad or your Kindle. Anyway, pick out 4 or 5 words at random. That is, to place your finger somewhere on a page with your eyes closed, and then take a look at the nearest word that is more than about 5 characters, and do that about 4 or 5 times. Write those words down. String them together, separating each with some special character, like an underscore, an ampersand, or a hash sign, or some other special character. Doesn't really matter what. You want to capitalize at least one of the words, maybe make one of them all caps. You'll need to remember which one, of course. You also want to insert a number, some digit or whatever. For goodness sake, use something besides 1, 2, 3, something else. Memorize it and use it 4 or 5 times a day for a week or 2. And repeat this process at least twice a year. You want to replace that master password every 6 months or so. Yeah, I know it's a pain, but so is getting your site hacked. Now, you also want to back yourself up. I mean, if the worst happens and somebody actually does get access to your site and screws it up and puts some malware on it, or worse yet, something illegal, you can get in touch with your hosting provider and have them erase the site, and then you can restore it from your most recent backup. Now, you don't need a commercial tool to do this, but it does help. I use a commercial tool called Backup Buddy. It's kind of pricey, but it is a major time saver. The very first time I ever did a migration of one of my sites, which was made necessary because of the EIG takeover of a hosting provider that I was using, it basically used up an entire weekend. and I've been writing software for a living for about 35 years. I'm not any stranger to the techniques involved, but it was still enormously time consuming. Backup Buddy also comes with some anti-malware scanning. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit about current usage of this. I'm going to pause the recording for a few minutes while I get all logged in here. Okay, here I am in my dashboard of Make Money Blogging, and I'm going to go down here and take a look at let's see, my settings. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to do Backup Buddy. Okay, here's the Backup Buddy, and I'm going to select a complete backup. There's a click, and we see these things going by, and it's doing various different things in there, and it's growing my archive over here. It's currently about 14 megabytes, and it's going along. And remember, I said the first time I did something like this, it used up an entire weekend. Let's see, it's still going. Oh, it's not going. It was completed in 16 seconds. And I can go back to my backups, and what I want to do is download that goodie right there, save it, and it saved actually fairly quick. I've got a fairly high bandwidth connection here at my place. And so a restore, by the way, takes about the same amount of time. Back when I was on a HostGator, by the way, that was about 5 minutes, not 15 seconds. And I had several sites that were too big to actually back up because they took enough time so that the scripts timed out. Back to my slideshow here. Anyway, that's Backup Buddy. By the way, that backup is encrypted with a key that I had generated using my password manager and saved that way. So it would be, and just in case, I do not leave the backups on the server, which means after I finish this, I'm going to go back and delete it. They also have some anti-malware scanning, which is kind of useful. It turns out that a lot of times a hacker who actually gets access to your site will not actually start using it for 2 or 3 weeks, just in case you're making good backups. That makes it difficult if you restore from a backup without his backdoor in it. So you want to have backups, and you want to keep those backups for several months. Another way of dealing with script kiddies and brute force logins is misdirection. The way I do it is I have a dummy admin. Admin is a default for the WordPress administrator account. Most newbies never change the name of that account, and most newbies actually use fairly short, easy to guess passwords, which makes brute force attacks actually worth doing. If everybody started all of a sudden using really strong passwords, they probably would have the script kiddies going to some other method of attack. I leave the admin account there, which is also user 0 in the database, which is another way it's found. But I create another admin account, and then I remove all the access from the admin account. And this is what is called a honeypot. It attracts attackers and wastes their resources. Here is the user admin off of the moneyblogging.net site. Notice that the username remains admin, but the role is no role for this site. Everything else there is keyed to make it look like this is a legitimate account, including this email address, which does not actually exist. Another way to deal with attackers is to try to slow them down. Typically what's happening is brute force scripts use a rapid series of attempts to guess the admin password, and then when they finally get in, then they go ahead and plant a backdoor or whatever on your site. Now, a really strong password should take multiple centuries on the average to break. If you can slow them down instead of multiple centuries, you can actually extend that out to many eons. The limit login attempts has some features that helps with that. Unfortunately, it's of limited use. A massive brute force using a distributed botnet can actually take your site down without actually hacking it. In fact, I observed one of my more popular sites being very difficult. Basically, it was offline. I could not get to it, and I thought I'd been hacked. I went on to my service provider, my hosting provider, and got them in an interactive chat session, and found out that I hadn't been hacked, but the attack was so massive. It was several hundred attempts per second that it was overwhelming the site, using up all of the available CPU and all of the available memory and virtual memory. So I couldn't even get to it using FTP. I had to have help from the hosting company, which, by the way, I recommend these folks, the D9 hosting, and here is a link that you could use in that. They have been very helpful. They're small enough that they are not of interest to the EIG empire, and so they still have very high reliability, very good support, and very good performance. And by the way, I'll also say here that if you're serious about making money on the internet, do not get shared hosting, not even from D9, and don't use any of the EIG providers at all. The load time of your sites is going to be low. It's going to be difficult to make backups. There's going to be all kinds of problems with shared hosting. But from a security standpoint, if you are hosting multiple sites on a shared hosting account, then all of those sites are actually tied in with the same Linux login. That means that if the attacker manages to hack one of your sites, he has all of them. In fact, he may end up being able to own the sites from any other customer who is also sharing that hosting with you. What I have is a reseller account, even though I do not resell, but each of my accounts or domains is actually hosted on a separate Linux account. So if somebody actually managed to break into one of them, I can call up my ISP, or rather not my ISP, but my hosting provider, and have them take that site down and reinitialize it, bring it back up, and then I can restore it from my most recent backup. I haven't had to do that in a while because of other things that I've done. Any rate, later on, I was able to get pending attacks early enough to actually stop them. That may have been mostly just luck. I use some different techniques now that are more effective. The more effective way to deal with the attacker is to stop the attack, not to make it slower or whatever, use up the resources, but just make it go away. There are four main ways to do that, only three of which are really available to most people. The first one is a secondary password, and that can be accomplished with the Google Authenticator plugin and with Stealth Login plugin, and there's probably a few others. I'll show you an example with both of those installed. There's also a special file called IP tables, which I will not talk about, because if you actually have access to IP tables, that means that you're running your own server, which means that you're probably not going to get much new information out of this presentation, because that takes a significant level of expertise. However, you can get a hold of something called htaccess or .htaccess, and I'm going to talk about a couple of ways to use that. Lastly, you can password protect your wp-login.php file and your wp-admin directory. That is a very effective method. I'm not using that one very much now, but I have seen how effective it is, and I will be using it more in the future. It is somewhat of a pain, but security is actually pretty much a pain anyway. The only thing worse is having your site attacked, or site successfully attacked, and having to recover from that, having to clean up. The Google Authenticator uses a two-factor ID, and one of them is generated by a Google app that you load on your Android cell phone, and it works really well, and it's a pain in the butt to use. What you do is you go into your login screen, and then you take out your cell phone and you fire up the Google Authenticator app, and it generates a 6-digit temporary password that's good for 30 seconds. And you enter that and complete your authentication. I have it installed on some of my sites, and I have it actually enabled on the dummy honeypot accounts. So those are protected well enough that it looks like they're the real thing. I have actually seen, after I've installed Google Authenticator and not even used it, that the rate of attacks goes down substantially. So apparently this Google Authenticator is well enough known that a lot of the script kiddies recognize that and don't even bother. The other one is Stealth Login. It works similar to the Google Authenticator, but it's not really a two-factor authentication. It's just another password. And that password, by the way, when you type it in, you'll see that it comes out in plain text. It's not even hidden, which is not really all that great. But it's another layer of stuff that makes it difficult for a script kiddie to actually run a pre-done script that will brute force your site. Now, the interesting thing about that is that you can have a URL of your choice to send the person trying to log in wherever you want if they do not put in the proper second authorization code. On a lot of my sites, I use a well-known hate site, which I won't mention here, but I couldn't think of a better place to send known malware traffic. In some of my other sites, I actually just redirect the person to one of my affiliate sites on Amazon. Typically, Amazon can handle the traffic, and they can also handle the malware. Unfortunately, a brute force can still use up enough of your resources to make your site unresponsive, like it did to me. Here is a login screen with the Google Authenticator right here down at the bottom, and the Stealth Login both installed. So you end up having to put 4 pieces of information in there to successfully log in. Now there's another item there. I told you I wasn't going to talk about the WP tables, or excuse me, IP tables. But htaccess is something that most hosting providers will give to you if you have something like cPanel access. It's used for a variety of things, such as URL shorteners, which I use it on one of my websites for that, redirects, 401 pages, and for the purposes of what we're talking about here, control over what IP addresses can access your site. You can access that htaccess file using a free plugin called WP htaccess editor. I have used that and it works real well, but it's a really good way to make it easy to completely screw up your own site. So I basically don't use that anymore. I do all of my edits to htaccess offline and then use an FTP tool to upload it. And another reason I do that is because you can't access that file in your top level directory. htaccess is a per directory file. You have one in every directory that you want to use the htaccess features on. And there are two of them. There's the top level where you actually get to your basic HTML, which gets to your WP login.php, and then the other one which has all the other stuff, which is WP admin. Now, the shortcomings on there, one of the things that I tried to do for a while was just find out what IPs were attacking, and I'd stick them into a deny list in my htaccess. Well, that's a little bit like bailing a sinking boat with a teaspoon. The botnets are so big and so fast that you'll get several hundred of these every day, and that gets to be a major pain and you eventually give up on it. Also, the longer your htaccess file, the slower your site loads. At one point I was actually seriously considering building a tool to automatically extract those rogue IPs and stick them into the htaccess file. And then I found out that that probably wouldn't work anyway, because there's a good chance that a lot of them are spoofed, which means I would be locking out innocent third parties. And every time you add something to your htaccess, it has to be loaded before anything else can happen to your site, which means that it slows it down. So if you have 7,000 or 8,000 lines in your htaccess file, you'll start noticing that your site starts to load slower. Now, the other thing, this is called blacklisting. Well, it turns out that you can whitelist. Now, that's usually a little bit better and a whole lot more efficient. Unfortunately, it doesn't work very well for multi-user blogs. It can be done, but you have to whitelist all of the IPs of people that you want to be able to log into your site. I have several of those and some guest blogs and various other things. And if you're interested in submitting into doing any blogging or guest articles, you can write me a blog owner at moneyblogging.net, and I'll tell you what those are. At home here, I have a DHCP, which means that every time I fire up my system, I have a different IP address. So what I do is I supply only the first 3 octets of that. If you move to a different location, say you go on vacation or go out on a cruise, or you change your internet service provider, or like me, you get a software contract in some place like Raleigh, North Carolina, then you have to reset that whitelist. Here is my current htaccess setup. I have the IPs X'd out, of course. I only use the top 3 octets of the IP. The only difference between the content of the htaccess in the main directory and in the WP admin directory is that in the main directory I specifically apply this to wp-login.php, whereas in the WP admin directory I just tack it on the bottom and use that for the entire site. And you'll see if you go to moneyblogging.net /WP-login or WP-admin, you will get a access denied. You can also set an external password. This is outside of WordPress altogether, assuming that you have cPanel or some similar access to your site. You can put a password on your WP login PHP file and on your directory WP admin. This has the advantage of being very efficient. It stops the attacker before WordPress is even loaded, and it doesn't depend on any feature of WordPress at all. I don't use this one much. I actually have it on one site, but I haven't used it because HT access whitelisting works well enough for now. I am going to be implementing it on my guest blogs. It's a little bit of a hassle for my guest authors, but again, it's less hassle than getting my site hacked. And by the way, I've seen several typos in here. I'll probably go over this. I will load this slideshow on my website so that you can download it if you want. Let's see. So, are we there yet? No, we're not. We have not defeated the script kiddies. One of the reasons for the existence of the script kiddie is that there are so many sites out there that are so easy to break into. The main reason is the admin account with a weak password. There are some things coming along in the future that might help. I hope they will help. One is the IPv6. One of the problems with the current IP setup, IPv4, is that the world has basically run out of IP addresses, so we have to have all these little private subnets attached. And we have to do things like DHCP and so forth. With IPv6, we will actually have enough address space to assign a unique IP address to every subatomic particle in the known universe. So there should be enough. Another thing that's coming along is the strong, ubiquitous encryption. Encryption right now is kind of a pain, and not very many people use it. And the folks that do use it tend to be high-profile, high-value targets. Encryption will become much more effective when everybody uses it. That's because it will no longer stick out as, oh, this guy's encrypting his stuff, it must be valuable. What you can do right now in terms of just general security, well, one is to be vigilant about your WordPress updates. Don't just let those lag. And also, if you have plugins or themes that you're not using, delete them. Just get rid of them altogether. Sometimes there'll be a hole, a security hole in an unused theme or an unused plugin. That also means that you want to avoid plugins and themes that are not actively being updated. So if you have a plugin that hasn't been updated in the last 2 or 3 years, it's probably suspect unless it's a real simple one and you understand what's going on. And the other thing to be aware of is social engineering. Social engineering is probably the biggest security hole there, and there's nothing that's going to make that go away anytime soon. My mother fell victim to a social engineering attack, and I ended up having to reformat her hard drive. Actually, with some help from my brother. I have another way of dealing with that I haven't applied to her system yet, but I will. And that is, I'm going to force her to boot off of a CD-ROM. So far, I don't think there's any way that the social engineering folks can get around that. In conclusion, use strong, unique passwords. Get a password manager and use it. Don't use the same password for any 2 sites, at least not anything that you actually care about. Backup. Backup early, backup often. Backup every time you make a change to one of your sites. Test your backups. Oh, in one case, I failed to test a backup, and I discovered too late that it didn't work. On your admin account, that default admin account, you either need to get rid of it or convert it to a honeypot like I did. Then you can take some steps to slow down the brute force attacks or try to completely repel the attacker, or both. And always, when you see an update coming out for WordPress or any of the themes or any of the plugins, make sure that you apply those updates in a timely manner. And beware of social engineering. Actually, be paranoid. Or, in the words of one famous wag, if they're really out to get you, it isn't paranoia. And really, this is not paranoia. Thank you for listening. I hope that this was of use to you. If it was, please share it with your friends.